My name is Evelyn Harper, and 3 months ago I stood at the back of a church, hidden beneath a black coat and dark sunglasses, watching people cry over my coffin. They believed I was dead. The priest spoke softly about my kindness, my generosity, and the legacy I had supposedly left behind. My younger brother Jason sat in the front pew, with his face buried in his hands, pretending to sob so hard that his shoulders shook. His wife Monica dabbed fake tears from her perfectly applied makeup while accepting hugs from guests who believed she was grieving. Around them sat business partners, employees, old friends, and neighbors, all mourning a woman they believed would never return. I should have been heartbroken by the scene. Instead, I felt something much colder. It wasn't grief. It wasn't sadness. It was instinct. Something about the way Jason cried didn't feel real. Every few seconds, he glanced toward the lawyer sitting beside him, and when he thought nobody was looking, the corners of his mouth twitched upward into the smallest smile. It lasted only a second, but I saw it. That tiny smile changed everything. At that moment, I realized I wasn't watching my family mourn my death. I was watching them celebrate it. Just 2 weeks earlier, my life had been completely different. At 44 years old, I had everything I once dreamed about. I had built Harper Technologies from a tiny rented office with a single secondhand computer into one of Canada's fastest-growing software companies. Every success had come through years of sleepless nights, impossible deadlines, and sacrifices most people would never understand. I had skipped vacations, birthdays, relationships, and countless family gatherings because I believed I was building something that would one day secure my family's future. I wasn't married, and I never had children. My parents had both passed away years before, leaving my younger brother Jason as the only close family I had left. I loved him more than anyone in the world. When he struggled financially after losing his construction business, I bought him a beautiful house instead of lending him money. When Monica wanted to open a fashion boutique that failed within a year, I quietly paid every outstanding debt without asking for repayment. When my niece Lily was accepted into one of the best private schools in Ontario, I covered every tuition payment because I wanted her to have opportunities that Jason and I never had growing up. Every Christmas, every birthday, every family dinner reminded me why I worked so hard. Whenever someone told me I was too generous, I always laughed and answered the same way. Money comes and goes. Family is forever. Looking back now, I realize those words were spoken by someone who had never imagined that family could become the greatest danger of all. The accident happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I had an important meeting in Vancouver with investors who were considering a major partnership worth hundreds of millions of dollars. My assistant wished me luck before I boarded the small private aircraft that our company frequently chartered for executive travel. The weather forecast looked perfect. The pilot smiled confidently as we took off, and I spent the first hour reviewing financial reports while drinking coffee. Then, everything changed in less than 30 seconds. A loud metallic bang echoed through the cabin, followed by violent shaking that threw my laptop onto the floor. The pilot's calm voice disappeared, replaced by frantic radio calls I couldn't understand. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. The aircraft suddenly tilted so sharply that I slammed against the seatbelt. Outside the window, the peaceful blue sky spun into a blur of trees and clouds. I remember praying louder than I had prayed in years. I remember gripping the armrests until my fingers turned white. Then came another explosion. The lights went dark. Everything around me dissolved into terrifying noise, twisting metal, and complete darkness. When I opened my eyes again, I couldn't understand where I was. The silence felt unnatural after the violence of the crash. My entire body screamed with pain. Every breath burned through my ribs. Blood trickled into my eyes from a cut across my forehead. The aircraft had broken apart among towering pine trees, deep inside a remote forest. Smoke drifted lazily into the morning air, while pieces of metal lay scattered across the ground. Somehow, my seat had been thrown clear of the worst impact. I tried to stand, but collapsed almost immediately. Every movement felt impossible. I shouted for the pilot, but no answer came. I shouted again for anyone at all. Nothing. The forest remained silent except for distant birds and the crackling sound of burning wreckage. Hours passed before exhaustion forced me to stop calling for help. I honestly believed I would die there alone. But fate had one final surprise. Two hikers exploring an isolated trail noticed smoke rising above the trees and followed it until they found the crash site. They called emergency services immediately and stayed beside me until the rescue helicopter arrived. I drifted in and out of consciousness as doctors worked frantically to keep me alive. Because my identification had been destroyed in the crash, the hospital admitted me as an unknown patient. I suffered several broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, a severe concussion, and countless cuts and bruises. For days, I remained heavily sedated while police searched for surviving passengers. News channels across Canada reported that the private aircraft had crashed with no survivors. My company released a statement expressing sorrow over my presumed death. Social media filled with photographs and tributes. Employees cried together in the office. Investors mourned the loss of the company's founder. My family publicly thanked everyone for their prayers. All of this happened while I lay unconscious only a few hours away, completely unaware that the entire world believed I was gone forever. When I finally woke fully, everything felt confusing. My memory returned slowly. Doctors explained what had happened and assured me I was incredibly fortunate to be alive. A police officer gently told me that everyone believed I had died in the crash because rescue teams hadn't located any survivors during the initial search. He offered to contact my family immediately so they could come to the hospital. I was about to agree when one of the nurses walked into my room carrying her phone. "Miss Harper," she said quietly, "I thought you should know. Your funeral is tomorrow." She showed me an online news article featuring a large, smiling photograph of me beside the headline announcing my memorial service. Thousands of comments expressed sympathy. Hundreds of employees planned to attend. Something inside me hesitated. Instead of asking the police to call Jason, I asked one simple question. "Has my brother spoken publicly?" The nurse nodded and showed me another video. Jason stood before television cameras, wearing a black suit. Tears streamed down his face as he spoke about losing his beloved sister. His words sounded perfect. Too perfect. Yet something behind his eyes felt strangely empty. I couldn't explain why, but every instinct I possessed told me not to reveal myself just yet. The police respected my decision, although they couldn't understand it. I asked them to keep my survival confidential for just a little longer. They reluctantly agreed while completing paperwork related to the ongoing investigation into the crash. During the next 24 hours, I couldn't stop thinking about Jason's interview. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe grief affected people differently. Maybe guilt over surviving had clouded my judgment. But every time I replayed the video, that uneasy feeling returned stronger than before. Finally, I made the most unusual decision of my life. Instead of calling my family, I checked myself out of the hospital under police supervision, borrowed plain clothes, covered my injuries as best I could, and quietly traveled to my own funeral. Standing in the back of the church, I watched people I had known for decades speak about my life. Former employees described how I had changed their futures. Friends remembered vacations and celebrations. One elderly janitor, whom I had quietly helped years earlier, cried harder than anyone else in the building. His grief felt genuine. So did Lily's. My teenage niece looked completely devastated. She held a photograph of us together and cried openly throughout the service. Seeing her pain nearly broke my heart. For one dangerous moment, I wanted to run to her, hug her, and tell her I was alive. But then Jason walked toward the podium. He cleared his throat dramatically before speaking. "My sister believed in one thing above all else," he said. "She believed families should always stay together." Several guests nodded while wiping away tears. Jason continued, "I promise to honor her final wishes and continue leading everything she worked so hard to build." The applause that followed echoed through the church. I noticed Monica lean toward the company's attorney and whisper something that made him nod quickly. Then she smiled. Not a smile of comfort or gratitude, but the satisfied smile of someone whose plan was finally succeeding. A chill ran through my body, despite the warm summer afternoon. I suddenly realized I wasn't the only one watching carefully anymore. When the ceremony ended, mourners slowly walked outside toward the cemetery, while I remained hidden behind a stone pillar near the church entrance. Jason and Monica didn't go directly to the burial. Instead, they quietly slipped away, through a side exit, and climbed into a black luxury SUV. Something told me to follow them. I hired a taxi and asked the driver to keep a safe distance. Nearly 40 minutes later, the SUV pulled into the driveway of my mansion, the very house I had purchased with years of hard work. I expected to see grieving family members gathering quietly inside. Instead, I watched delivery workers carry expensive cases of champagne through the front door. Laughter drifted from open windows. Music began playing. Guests arrived carrying gift bags instead of flowers. Confused and horrified, I climbed a nearby hill overlooking the property, just in time to see Jason step onto the back patio, holding a crystal glass high above his head. "To new beginnings," he announced with a broad smile. "And to finally being in charge." My hands began trembling. Something terrible was happening, and I had only just begun to discover the truth.